Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another episode of the Sydney Project Railroad build. In episodes 8 and 9, you may have seen me build the 2 ramps down to the lower staging yard. This week we have a smorgasbord of progress in various areas. So without further ado, let's just head out to the workshop and get busy. I hope you enjoy the show. My task for this morning is to frame up the first piece of the peninsula. This frame is much wider at one end than it is the other, has a curved front. Refer back to the design video if you want a refresher. Anyway, over the weekend I got all the curved frames glued up, not only for this piece but for the one directly above it as well. So anyway, I marked out the rear stringer the same way that I normally do them. Same way that I do top and bottom plates for building construction, and then I worked out where the fronts go by putting a big square and a straight edge and then marking the front that way. The first 4 joists are the same length. After that they get progressively longer, and once I've got that end of the frame built, I will put this one in at this end and then fill in the others, cutting them one at a time. At the moment, they are cut oversize. Anyway, I'm going to get back to work and I'll check in with you later, so don't go away. Well, that is the parallel portion of this frame built, and the end joist marked to fit. I just drew a line underneath it with a pencil, so now I have a cut line. I know this one doesn't reach. No, it's not a mistake. It was a deliberate decision to be able to build more of the frame on the flat. This one actually gets doubled up. See, there's 2 X's here because that is one of the C-beams to support the upper level. And only one of them needs to hold the front of the frame. The other one still reaches the leg, which is as far as it needs to go. Anyway, I'm going to get this one cut and installed, and then I can cut the other 3 to length one at a time and get everything to fit nice and tight. So let me do that and I will be right back. Well, this frame has now been positioned accurately and leveled. Haven't bolted it in place yet. Still got the clamps holding it to the previous frame. These 2 sticks at this end hold it the correct distance from the other piece of benchwork. It's 36¼ inches, allowing for 2 pieces of fascia and a 36-inch aisle. I had to put that outrigger on the end because this frame ends before the parallel portion of this one starts, just by a small amount. So the aisle is actually a little bit wider than 36 at this point. It goes to about 38 and then narrows down again. And I've still got to work out the curve that goes in this area. Well, it starts with a straight that lines up with that, and then there's a gentle curve, and then a 14-inch radius curve at the end of the aisle. Well, in addition to putting in the bolts in to permanently attach this piece, I've also got the formers in for the fascia at the curved aisle end. As I mentioned earlier, it's a 14-inch radius curve at the end, and this taper just lines up with the previous one. That is about all the framing I can do at the moment. I'm still waiting for the client to get back to me and let me know how wide the opening is through the floor of his garage into the basement, because the next section to be added to here has a deep valley in it. And with the framing of the upper deck being integral to the middle deck, the frame is going to be too tall to tip on its back to go through that hole. So I have to go through vertically, and I need to know whether the hole is wide enough to do the benchwork in one piece. Otherwise it's going to have to split down the middle, with the backdrop and the upper level frame being a separate piece. Well, after I made that last clip, I realized there was plenty more I can get on with. The full-size print for the staging yard ladder arrived a couple of days ago, so I set that up, put some turnouts on it, and I worked out where I have to cut this benchwork. I've already removed this piece and cut the 3 slots with a jigsaw. This piece for the main lines comes up slightly, and this bit for the ramp drops. So I've marked underneath. So I have to notch that one and that one slightly so I can lower this. Let me do that and I will be right back. Well, I only came out here for a half day yesterday. I didn't bring the camera with me, but I did get the sub-roadbed extended around this corner. The mainline grade is permanently installed. I haven't installed the bits for the spurs yet, but I am going to continue with the next piece of mainline grade and then work back into the spurs. So let me get back to work and I'll check in with you later. Don't go away. Well, this morning I got the sub-roadbed done in this corner and along the first of the straight sections. This was one piece of plywood, had to be cut because of the subtle elevation changes. These two pieces at the back are level, but one is 1/4 inch higher than the other, and the main lines in front are on about 0.5% grade. I needed to get the grade in to get enough clearance for the lower track to pass under at this point. The turnout where the two tracks diverge is about here, and both grades start shortly after. The vertical curves are on this board. And then that one is about 1.8% down, and this one is about 0.5% up. This 0.5% grade finishes here, and then it'll be level over the next probably 20 feet or so over the bridges. And then the 2.1% grade up to the upper level will start somewhere around here. Something else you may notice is that I have the rollabout section out. I wanted to keep it in place until I had all the sub-roadbed in this corner permanently attached so that it holds this area square. And then I took it out, put it back in again, and it still fits perfectly, which is what I was hoping. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but I have a string line stretched along the front of the benchwork just to make sure that it's straight. I'm going to have to remove it now because I'm packing up the risers where I need to install the riverbed, and that's going to get in the way of the string line. I don't want to get glue all over it because that could really mess it up. Well, that is 20 more feet of sub-roadbed installed. It includes the river crossing. What I've done here is made myself a rough plywood mock-up that's exactly the right size for 3 of these spans. So it's 69 inches by 5 with just simple plywood piers in the appropriate places. That way I could get that positioned and then work to it from both ends. The river has to be on this board because that is the only place where both of the hidden grades are low enough to duck under it. Well, this is how far I got on Friday. I have the sub-roadbed in all the way from the end through this long, lazy S-curve to about here. And the lower junction starts here. There'll be one turnout on this board and the rest of it on this curved one. If you recall from the drawing, you may notice I have already departed slightly from what I drew, and that is because I always figured that it would look better with the truss bridge at a slight angle, although when I draw structures in third planet at almost 90 degrees to the room, just slightly off, they look weird. So I drew it straight, knowing that I would ultimately put a twist in it. But I think I want to put slightly more twist in it. Something that's not always evident on a flat track plan is where you have enough space for the slopes. And to get a worthwhile amount of water along the front here, I want to get an extra inch or two before the tracks. So I'm going to cantilever this board out over the lower track slightly. So I'm going to put a slightly more of a curve in there. And also at this corner, I realised that I can make better use of the space by moving the main lines forward a little bit, leaving more room for the abandoned depot with the parking lot behind it. It would probably been better if I had figured that out before I permanently attached the risers, but it doesn't really matter. I always take the precaution of only screwing the tops so I can still move those. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time this morning making those minor adjustments. I think that will be well worth it in the final effect. But before I do that, I'm going to get this corner finished so that I know exactly how much space I have. I don't want to go too far the other way. So let me do all that and I will be right back. Well, I didn't make any more clips while I was adjusting the sub-roadbed. I also did a whole load of other things concurrently with it. I got this corner former in. I put in the sub-roadbed for the abandoned spur and the pulpwood loading spur. I had to plot these corners accurately, which meant getting the full-size trap print out again and putting the turnouts on it. I have found that the Pico curved turnouts are slightly sharper than what they're drawn at in my Third Planet libraries. So I was able to save about ½ an inch on this curve, and that helped to improve the alignment here and get enough space between the tracks for a decent rock cut to hide the downgrade. Here we can see how much I moved it by about 2 inches. I will fill that in with something else. It actually doesn't need to be ½ inch plywood, but since I had the piece available that I cut out from between the others, I may as well put it in to give a firm foundation for the structure here. That's also the reason I have that wider piece at the back, to provide a firm foundation for the grain elevator. I put the 2 number 7 turnouts where they're going to go, just to make sure that I've got the alignment correct. And I feel like I've now got the track in the optimum location to give enough space behind it for a nice solid tree line, while still leaving as much space in front as possible for the water scene. I've still got to adjust the grade slightly, so along this board there will be packing pieces progressively taller on each riser. This piece of sub-roadbed for the junction is in its final location. When I say final location, I might still adjust the grade slightly. At the moment, it's set at the ruling 2.2% grade. I think I said 2.1% earlier. No, it's not, it's 2.2. Not as though it makes a huge difference. The ruling grades for the railroad are 1.8% eastbound and 2.2 westbound. So this piece of sub-roadbed is 10 inches wide for the junction, and then I've got a 6.5 inch wide piece and a 3.5 inch wide, which is not in frame right now, for the double and single tracks respectively. I also continued the sub-roadbed for the lower grade and even put the foam rubber on it. And the other thing I did concurrently was add some missing framing at the other end of the railroad. Anyway, that is enough waffling for now. I am going to continue with installing this piece of sub-roadbed, get that in its final location, get it firmly installed, and then I will plot the curves and the junction around here, and then finish adjusting the grade for the rest of the run. So let me get on with that, and I will be right back. Well, I've finished installing the double track rising grade as far as the benchwork joint. I still have to cut it off the length. I deliberately made it a little bit long so I had some tolerance. I've marked the center lines of the tracks, allowing a 3/8 of an inch offset here for a generous easement into a much larger curve, far too large to measure. It'll just have to be eyeballed. I've worked out where the 5 number 10 turnouts go for the junction. Initially, I was trying to work out a system where I could get the whole junction on the same board. But it was a little bit cramped getting the signals on that board as well. So I decided to move it just a little bit, and I've got 4 turnouts on the main board, and the last turnout goes onto the next one. It allows slightly more length for the opposing grade for the single track down to the return loop. So it improves it there. And the signal bridges don't have to be right at the ends of a section where they are more likely to get damaged. Because I don't want to have to take the signals out for transportation, I want to leave them installed. Anyway, I like the position of that junction. I like the alignment now. There's going to be another very large curve, very short but large radius curve before the bridge. So this entire 40-foot length is one very long reverse curve. It just gives it a lot more interest than if I were to run straight down the middle of the benchwork. Well, I've now finished what I said I was going to do in the last clip. I have adjusted the grade along this side of the room. Instead of ending the 0.5% grade about here, I extended it another 7 feet. So the bridge is now slightly higher off the water. So I added plywood feet to the piers. And then the grade starts up again about here. It goes at about 1.4, 1.5% through the junction. And then the ramp to the upper level steepens at this point at 2.2%. While the branch line to the reversing loop continues for a short distance at 0.5 and then levels out about here. And that will go level around the end curve until it passes over the other main line, and then it will drop down to the reversing loop. Anyway, there's still a little bit of time left today. I think what I'm going to do now is work on getting some foam rubber roadbed installed. I'm going to start at this end, in the corner where the staging yard starts, and I'm going to work my way around the room in the same direction as I did this plywood. So let me get on with that, and I will be right back. Don't go away. Well, with the foam roadbed, I started at this end. Note that there is an 1/8 of an inch step right here, where I go from the thin roadbed to the thick roadbed for the visible portion of the railroad. And I have gone all the way around all the way the whole length of the room, put in the junction for the branch line to the reversing loop. I haven't filled in for the crossovers yet, and I haven't done any of the spurs in this corner. But it's already 6 o'clock, and I'm going to call that a day. I will do that tomorrow. There's 2 spurs in this corner and this one, and they get the thin roadbed. So I've got to make the transitions. I've got to put triangles under the turnouts and then go to the thin roadbed, and then the track will just ramp down in the spur using spacers. Well, this morning, after getting the foam roadbed finished, getting all the spurs in, I started working on Subroadbed at this end of the room again, at the end of the aisle. And I got most of this corner installed, well, all the lower level. I haven't done the upper level curve yet, but I need to tie both legs of the Y into the back of this frame. And this is really complex because I've got to have C brackets capable of supporting the 3-foot wide benchwork for the yard above it. But there has to be 2 side-by-side tracks cutting through it. So I've got a divided post with a tension member in the back, and there will be a compression member in the front. I'm trying to minimize the width. At the moment, I'm at about 8.5 inches, which I think is about the minimum that I'm going to be able to go with. This area is all mocked up. I haven't glued anything yet. It's all screwed because I've got to take it apart and cut everything to size and redo it. I haven't even got these posts the right height yet. They're just placeholders at the moment. But I've come to the conclusion that before I can finish that area, I have to do the workbench and the track behind it. So I've got to fill in this corner and work back from there, and then I can get this bit done. I'm going to go inside now and design it, and I'll come back out tomorrow and build it. Well, that's all we have time for this week. It's a little bit longer than usual, but that's okay. Next week I will build the workbench under the harbour area, and I hope to see you back here for that. So in the meantime, have a great week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.